Good afternoon, and I wish to welcome the officials of the Office of the President, members of the media, and the public to this public hearing of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. And despite the fact today is the 12th day of January, I think it's sufficiently early enough to still extend New Year greetings to the officials of the Office of the President, the member of the media, and the wider public on behalf of the members of the committee and on my own behalf. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of the government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keep Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 7th public meeting of the 11th Parliament of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee is to examine the Office of the President's expenditure and internal controls for inventory control, internal audit, accountability and transparency, subhead 02, which is goods and services, and subhead 03, minor equipment purchases. I wish to advise that the remit of the committee involves the examination of the accounting officer and his role and responsibility as it relates to the financial business of the state and the use of public funds entrusted to his care for expenditure at the Office of the President. The committee is desirous of hearing from the accounting officer and other key officials of the Office of the President to discover the challenges being faced and determine possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to assist in the efficient functioning of the department while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. In addition, viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email to parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and Twitter @ttparliament. I will now invite the officials from the Office of the President to introduce themselves to the committee and to the public.
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. From the left. Come forward.
Madam Chair, members, I am Taron Budan. I am the Communication Advisor in the Office of the President.
Madam Chair, good afternoon. I am Fleet Chief Petty Officer Williams, Fleet Mechanic from Office of the President.
Madam Chair, good afternoon. Members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Shoshana Lal, and I am the Senior Legal Officer in the Office of the President.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I am Gregory Sarat, Secretary to His Excellency. Thank you.
Madam Chair, good afternoon, everyone. I am Ms. Chandra Mahadev. I'm Acting Assistant Secretary to the President.
Madam Chair and rest of the committee, my name is Brian Lee, Advisor to the Office of the President.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Priscilla Trotman, and I'm the Accountant Acting Officer of the President.
Thank you very much. And may I then invite members of the committee, starting from my extreme right, to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. Daniel Dupuis is my name, member.
Good afternoon. Nicole Olivier, member.
Good afternoon, Maxi Kafi, member.
Good afternoon, Alison Bash, member.
Good afternoon, Lakram Bodo, Vice Chairman. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon, Dineshwar Mahavir, member.
Good afternoon, Clarence Rambarat, member.
And I am the chairman of the committee, Bridget Anisette George, and I would just like to take note that we are ably assisted by our secretary, Ms. Kiba Jacob, and our assistant secretary, Ms. Sharon Samuel. Again, welcome. And Mr. Surratt, I now invite you to make a brief opening statement concerning the office of the president.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The Office of the President, the staff of the Office of the President provides support services to His Excellency the President in executing his functions and duties as enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. As head of state, the office carries great constitutional responsibilities, duties, and a high expectancy of flawless functionality. This group of public service professionals, headed by the Secretary to His Excellency the President, who is the accounting officer, is responsible for the management of the public funds at the Office of the President. However, the Office of the President is faced with various challenges, namely understaffing and very limited office space. As a result of understaffing, members of staff are regularly asked to perform excessive duties on various schedules, especially as leave reliefs are not forthcoming. In an effort to ease the lack of office space, temporary adjustments were made. However, it is inadequate. Currently, the office is operating under inherent systems and procedures that needs updating and improving, as is the case with the wider public service. I look forward to the outcome of this meeting, hoping that challenges that have been identified can be overcome, and more so, made aware of those problems you have identified that we are not aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Surratt. I see from your submission that you've indicated that the accounting officer ensures that there is compliance with the code circular that helps guide the work, and also that the accounting officer ensures compliance with financial regulations and the Exchequer and Audit Act. Maybe you could share with us what forms of support you are provided with as the accounting officer.
Madam Chair, the support that we get to the Office of the President, the Assistant Secretary, we have an accounting unit, as well as an auditing staff, and further others, the executive staff of the President.
Okay, in terms of your accounting unit, that's comprised of how many persons? 12? And the executive staff is comprised of how many?
6 persons.
6 persons. Okay. Now, maybe you could tell me a bit of the relationship that, as accounting officer of the Office of the President, the relationship you share with the head of the public service in terms of, not on a personal level, but how do these two functionaries interact?
The head of the public service, we normally meet via telephone to discuss matters relating to accounting procedures. Normally, if there needs to be in writing, I would respond to their requests as required.
Yeah. So would I be correct in asking then that if you report to the head of the public service, is there a reporting relationship?
Only where needs be, not on a regular basis.
Okay, so, or maybe if I could ask it in another way then, are you part of the board of permanent secretaries? Would your office form part of that?
No.
No. And therefore, in terms of accounting purposes, is there any accounting relationship between your position and any part of the public service?
No.
No? Okay, and thank you. And in terms, therefore, are there performance assessments done on your position?
No.
No, okay. And one last thing that you could help, I guess, the committee in understanding how we look at the accounting officer of this department is that when you assumed office, the office as accounting officer, would you have been given instructions or directions with respect to your role and responsibilities by anybody?
Yes, Madam Chair, by the Ministry of Finance.
By the Ministry of Finance?
Yes.
Okay.
A document.
A document?
Yes.
Okay, could you share with us what document that is? Does it have a specific name?
The role and functions of the accounting officer?
Yes.
Yes.
As relates to the particular
yes.
department?
Department.
So there's a specific document that relates to the rules and responsibilities of the
Yes.
accounting officer as relates to the office of the president?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that, as is our practice, we open up to other members, and I think I'd like to invite Member Duki to ask any questions if he wishes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions at this time deal with inventory control. You identified staffing challenges as one of your major shortcomings. How you intend to correct this or deal with this challenge?
In the past, Madam Chair, in the past we had made requests, continual requests to service commissions and the PMCD, but of no avail. So we intend to make further requests and hope that we get a reasonable.
So you expect improvements in the short
Yes.
term? All right. How do you ensure that there is control regarding the access to cabinets and vaults, to ensure that there is control?
The keys for the vaults and cabinets are kept. I will keep one copy and the accountant will keep a copy of the key.
So there is a policy in terms of who has access to?
Yes.
In terms of your inventory register, how do you treat with errors when they're identified?
We would, well, the audit department will get errors from the inventory, which will be passed on to me through the reports. And I will discuss it with the person in charge of the inventory and make the relevant changes to the inventory. If it's the labeling or whatever aspect is missing, and we will correct it.
How is it pursued in terms of doing an assessment to determine whether or not it is accurate? Is it periodically? Is it based on a particular time of the year?
At the end of the year, all the inventory is checked.
So if there is, or there was a conflict in terms of the register at the beginning of the year, you would not know until the end of the year?
No. At the end of the year, we do that specifically. But during the year,
so it's ongoing.
Periodic checks will be made to ensure that the register is up to date.
All right. And generally, regarding inventory or purchases made in this particular function, how do you ensure that there is value for money?
The audit, we never was trained in value for audit.
Say that again, sir.
We were never trained with value for money auditing. That auditing was never introduced to the Office of the President.
Okay, so you're saying that
it is,
you would not be able to determine whether or not you're getting the maximum value for the money that you spend?
We normally would check the items, well, to ensure that the quotations, it is in order with the quotations provided, to ensure the cost and the quality.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying to me that there is a system to determine, but you're saying to me that there is a need for improvement through training.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to take off from where member left off, and that is with respect to procurement, not particularly inventory control, but the procurement of the various goods and services which are purchased by President's House. And in particular, I know that the Office of the President, the President's House itself, hosts a number of functions during the year, must have. One, for example, is the award ceremony on Independence Day. And I'd like to know, since that is a continuing event, what are the procedures that you have in place to ensure that the cost of the function is minimized and that you are able to discharge all the obligations that you have traditionally discharged on ceremonies such as those within budget?
First of all, we will get the quotations from the various stakeholders. We would view the quotations to accommodate what our needs are, because sometimes the cost wouldn't be the only things to look at. We have to look at the service to ensure that we get good service. Then we would look at the performances, some not only for goods but also for services, and then that will be brought forward to create a better environment. We would have meetings prior to the meetings prior to the function and discuss other matters dealing with the procurement, and then we will go ahead and purchase whatever items you have to get.
But is there, thank you, Mr. Surratt, but is there a procedure where a contractor wishing to do business with your office could pre-register so that when these tenders go out, that particular company may be in a position to tender? Or is it that you have already a selected list of companies with which you do business?
We don't have a tendering process for that. We just use the suppliers, so we won't have a pre-contract. Nothing pre-contracted.
Remember, we don't already have a tendering process in place for contractors. We will get suppliers to provide the services. So we get the quotations from suppliers.
But what I'm asking about is really the procedure. Suppose someone wishes to do business to supply food, for example. How does that company go about making overtures to you that they are in the business of events and that they would like to be considered? Do they apply to you?
Yes.
Or they apply. So
They
there is
apply.
a procedure
Yes,
where
yes.
companies in Trinidad and Tobago can apply to your office to be considered to do business with your office.
Yes,
Okay.
they apply.
And could you indicate what that procedure is for the benefit of the wider public?
Okay, they apply, and it's kept on record, all the different suppliers. Thereby, we would go to we have a meeting to discuss further with the suppliers, and then we will get the prices, what they have to offer, and then the goods could be, and services could be provided.
Okay, one final question on it. Is it that you go on lowest cost bid, or is it that you have a preferred supplier pre-qualified that you will choose for the events that you host?
Lowest cost bid.
Okay.
Member Oliver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to follow on the line of questioning from Member Mahavir. In an earlier response, you indicated that in your instructions, you were given a specific document which speaks to the role of the accounting officer as it pertains to working within the office of the President. Now, there have been recent media reports which seem to indicate that there may have been some possible breach of public service tender rules. In an effort to ensure that no adverse impression is left in the public domain, I'd just like to ask some questions around specifically the role of the accounting officer in the procurement process. Now, my first question I'd like to ask is, what is the limit then of the accounting officer as it relates to procurement? Have there been any instances then where purchases may have been made which would have been in excess of that limit?
No.
No, thank you. Is there a tenders committee within the office of the President? Is it that one person would do the final approvals, or are there a number of officers that would get together and review the submissions?
Yeah, the vice the secretary, the officers in the house, the household staff, they would get together and get the items, the quote, sorry, and we will review it together and decide what stuff to buy.
Okay. Well, as the accounting officer, I mean, what would be your specific role in that entire process? Do you come into at the evaluation stage, or are you at the final approval stage?
Final approval.
Well, you would have indicated that, well, suppliers are selected. Is it your common practice then that you would go out for a minimum number of bids for each item?
It depends on the situation. Some, well, at least three is the marker we use. At least 3 quotations.
And for all purchases, you would maintain the final approval, or do you from time to time delegate that role depending on perhaps the value of the item being procured?
The control of the house, but we don't have any control of the house right now. The control of the house will make the decision based on the items. But it has to come to me to authorize the payments. But the control of the house normally does the final decision on the items to be purchased.
Well, this is on the item, but in terms of which supplier would be chosen,
Yes,
the controller of the house
Yes,
does that.
yes.
So, in a sense, you would have devolved some of that responsibility to the
Yes.
controller of the house in making that final decision. However, the final sign-off, the approval would be, so you would do that final sign-off based on the recommendation of the
Yes.
controller of the house?
Yes.
So currently, you do not have a controller, so would be taking that responsibility then, since you just indicated that you currently do not have a controller?
Mr. Fleet, Steve Williams, the fleet mechanic, he is assisting in the functions of the household.
Thank you.
I just want to go back a bit, Mr. Sarad. So when you said that Mr. Steve Williams, the Fleet Chief Petty Officer, is assisting in the functions of the household, is it that he is carrying out the duties of the control of the household?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Fully.
I just wanted to find out in terms of inventory control in particular. From your submission, I got the impression that that tags are used for identifying and keeping your inventory control. Are tags used?
Yes.
Yes, and these are used by a tagging machine.
Yes.
Now, I also got the impression that not all items are tagged. Is that so?
Due to the lack of staff, sometimes they are not all tagged all the time. Some are tagged after. So we have instances where some are not tagged.
Oh, so is it that you're saying that items may not be tagged immediately on acquisition, but they will be tagged at some later time?
Yes.
All right, because thanks for clarifying that, because it gave the impression from the submission that there was a sort of selective tagging process, and therefore one wanted to know what is the basis for the distinction, so that all items are tagged. The question would be a question of timing. Okay, so that if there is at times a lapse of time between acquisition and tagging, then I want to know what systems are in place for you to be assured that all things are eventually tagged. What is the sort of time, lapse of time between acquisition and tagging?
Most items are tagged immediately. But as I said, with the shortage of staff, some will not be tagged right away. So within a day or two.
Oh, within a day or two?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, again, you spoke about your process of your inventory control procedures, that goods are received and checked, they're entered into the inventory register, they're tagged in accordance with the store's regulations, and goods are then issued to the office of the president's house. Could you tell us the reference of the store's regulations to which you referred? That's Regulation 55.
55?
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And one last thing is that I would like to know when last your register was checked for accuracy, and what steps were taken, if necessary, for any sort of errors that may have occurred.
Madam Chair, it is an ongoing process, and we cannot give an exact date as to when it was last checked. But it's an ongoing process. And
so, do you check once a month, once a quarter? Because then you could tell me the likelihood of when the next check-in would be.
Yeah. Every quarter.
Every quarter?
Yes.
So that, would I be correct in saying that before March, the end of March of this year, there should be a check-in, a verification of your inventory
Yes.
register.
For sure.
Okay. And could you tell me any findings or discrepancies which may have occurred in the last period that you would have checked for verification, the inventory register?
The matter of the tagging, that was a discrepancy that we found.
It was in the inventory register, not just, it just wasn't tagged.
Yes, it was in the inventory register, but it just wasn't tagged. That was the last discrepancy.
And that was when? That was when?
That was the last.
Yes, I know it
check.
was the last. But that would have told us the last time you checked. So when was that? That was around when?
December, September, August, September.
August or September 2016
Yes.
would have been the last verification you would have done.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just tell me a bit, again, from your submission, I got the impression that non-perishables are not tagged? Or that perishables are not tagged?
Perishables are not tagged,
Okay, what constitute perishables?
like foodstuff,
Uh-huh.
glasses, plates. Well, it is destroyed now.
Yeah, so, and therefore, how do you then account for these?
We never really account for that.
Okay, so you don't account for things like anything that is perishable. So a
Oh,
vase,
breakables,
would you
yeah.
agree that a vase that is non-perishable,
No, we would register a vase.
you would register a vase?
Yes, but like plates and glasses.
And cutlery?
No, we would register the cutlery.
Okay, so let me ask, because I can understand food being a perishable. I'm not saying I can understand why it's not tagged, but I can understand a food being perishable. What then is your definition for perishable versus not perishable? That might help us so that we wouldn't have to go through a catalog of what is perishable and what is not. Yes.
Madam Chair? Yes, foodstuff, of course, and we look at that like glasses, what will easily be breakage, glasses or plates.
Okay, so would there be a distinction between a crystal glass and an ordinary glass?
Yes.
So
The crystal glass, we have
will
that
be tagged?
on it. Yes.
Okay. In terms of plates, is there a distinction between the type of plates for your tagging purposes?
Yes. Yes.
So the types of plates that are not tagged are what types?
Madam Chair, the ordinary ones. The ordinary plates. Plain.
And I'm not trying to grill you, I'm just trying for us
Yeah,
to
I-
understand. So what will determine ordinary? The cost of the plate, the brand of the plate,
The cost and the
Presidential, the presidential.
those without the crest it would be the ordinary one. The ordinary without the crest would be the ordinary ones.
okay. So that, can I then conclude that the use of the crest on some of the items is also a means of tagging?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And therefore you have those within your inventory control?
Yes.
All right? What determines that the crest goes on or not?
Madam Chair, yeah, the place with the crest would be used for official functions. They have a higher value, and those are bought in bulk.
Seal it for me. What is the lowest value to qualify for the crest? So I'll know that anything above this value would have the crest, and therefore is tagged.
Madam Chair, some of the plates with the crest was there for a very long time, so we can't really assess the various costs. But especially like China ware, those items will be crest.
Okay, so China, that has been acquired.
Of course, yeah, that will be for
So,
sure.
but I understand the historical context, but is it that since you've become accounting officer, that's how long? 3 years? 2014? 2 years, sorry. 3 soon. Is it that no items have been acquired which would bear the crest? Because we could use your experience, all right, to say what is the lowest figure to qualify from your experience. And you know, Mr. Sarrett, I'd like to also, to make you feel a little more comfortable, and it's your option, you can invite any member of your team if they had the specific knowledge to answer. You can do that.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, no cutlery was bought by the crest after this. We met that there, came and met that in the office of the president.
Yeah, but Mr. Williams, I understand that cutlery, if I remember well, cutlery is not a perishable item. I think I understood that. I might be wrong. And what I heard would have been an example of a perishable item is plates.
Plates and glasses.
Right, plates and glasses, okay? I think we all understand that there are different types of plate, quality plates, quality glasses.
Yes, madam.
All I want to know, what is the lowest threshold for a plate to move from the category of perishable to the category of non-perishable? What I was told, if I remember well, is that the bearing of the crest is what tells me this is a non-perishable.
Yes,
When it
ma'am.
comes to plates and glasses, and I expect teacups and saucers, okay? So that what I'm trying to ascertain, to help us, is if it were $200, would that qualify to be a request for a plate? Or if it were $50, would that qualify to be, that's what I'm really trying to find out.
Won't be able to see, Madam Chair.
Okay, so would I be correct then in saying that no perishable items other than food had been acquired from the period 2014?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Just to pick up, Madam President, does that include minor purchases, minor equipment as well? Because I saw you did have minor equipment purchased in the submission that you gave us.
But Mr. Mabe, may I just ask you to hold that? I know, in terms of the wider issue, but may I just ask you to hold that? I think, Member Mark, you have a question or some questions concerning inventory control as it relates to this issue. Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me welcome the team as well. Madam Chair, I would like to ask whether there is any booklet that would guide the staff at President's House in making a distinction between perishable items and non-perishable items. And in the instance of perishable items, non-perishable items, what would they comprise? And as such, as accounting officer, must be tagged. Do you have any kind of booklet that would guide the staff so that the assets of the state could be properly accounted for, Madam Chair?
Madam Chair, there is no booklet to guide as regards the differentiation of the perishable and non-perishable items.
Okay. Well, does that explain in your written submission the situation where, on average, the Office of the President spends about $693,000 per year to replace equipment? And if that is so, could you give this committee some of the reasons for equipment needing replacement in such a sum on an average basis, on an average yearly basis rather? Is that, maybe that could account for that kind of expenditure, since you don't have any system of accountability for non-perishable items at the office? Could that be responsible for this huge expenditure?
Madam Chair, that figure would be in the draft estimates. Right. Well, besides the purchase of the non-perishable items, that under minor equipment would also cover like air conditioned units, furniture and furnishings, and other items as well, not only the perishable, non-perishable items.
I think I heard, Madam Chair, that Mr. Surratt indicated that there is an inventory register at the office of the President?
Yes.
You do have one? Yes. How often is it audited, and by whom?
Madam Chair, the inventory is audited on a quarterly basis by the internal auditor.
Madam Chair, may I just ask one final before I come back again? Mr. Surratt, did you have a chance to look at the Auditor General's report, which was last published, as it relates to inventory control items?
Yes, I did.
Are you aware that the Auditor General made reference to items of furniture and equipment costing $129,818.59 and items costing $300,444.92, and that those items were not entered into the inventory register? And if you are, what measures or actions or steps you as accounting officer would have taken to rectify this and to ensure no recurrence in the future?
Madam Chair, those items were in the inventory register of the house. They have inventory register in the office, and they have some that is kept in the house. The auditors did not check the inventory registers for the house, so they recorded that it was not entered, but it was indeed entered in the house. The household register, inventory register.
The auditors didn't check. You're talking about the Auditor General's office?
Yes.
And what did you do to rectify this oversight? Did you bring this to the attention of the Auditor General, and has this matter since been rectified by the Auditor General?
We did respond to their letter, the management letter, and currently the auditors are doing auditing by us right now, and that is one of the things on their item to clarify that. So it was brought to their attention.
Right, Member Coffey. Thank you.
To the opening statement by the Secretary. Now, you mentioned that you are the accounting officer for the Office of the President, and I understand that there is a limit of $1 million for expenditure by an accounting officer. That's the limit across the public service. What happens when you need to incur expenditure above the $1 million limit?
That will be requested from the Central Tenders Board, and they will do the purchasing.
Have you
beyond $1 million?
Have there been instances where you have had to go to the Central Tenders Board to incur expenditure above 1 million?
I have never had the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
It was done in the past.
It was done in the past?
Yeah, purchase of a motor vehicle.
Okay. I know the regulations also provide for you to have a tenders committee for expenditure between 1 and 2 million. Does the Office of the President have such a committee?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to ask Mr. Surratt, if you could kindly provide the committee with a copy of Regulation 55, because what we found as the financial Regulation 55 doesn't deal with stores. So it may be that we are ourselves limited in, and I'll ask if after this you could supply us with the stores Regulation 55 for our own edification. Okay, I would therefore wish for us, I'm sure we haven't exhausted this topic. Member Amrat, is there a question you'd like to ask?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Not on this area yet.
All right, and therefore, if there are no further questions on this area, I think, we'd like to move on with the examination, and therefore, I would like to call on Member Bash to maybe introduce internal audit into the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your submission, you identified issues within the internal audit department, which is inadequate staff, a heavy volume of work for one person, and the inability of the Service Commission to provide replacement staff in a timely manner. What steps are being taken by the department to increase the internal audit staff?
Madam Chair, I'd like to pass this question to the internal audit. No, yeah. Yes, Madam Chair. That area of auditing is only one officer who has the audit for the Office of the President and the Integrity Commission. So the workload is enormous. Right? Attempts were made in the past from the PMCD. They came and reviewed not only the auditing aspect, but also from the office staff. And again, we got no further response from them. So we would be putting things in place to reapply for the whole office on a whole, auditing and the office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you say you got no further response from them, now I know sometimes ministries or agencies make a request, and if after conducting the appraisal and doing the necessary investigation, if they perceive that no additional staff is needed based on the volume of work, they may not recommend that you go forward. So when you say that you got no response from them, is it that they were not convinced of the need for the additional employees, or they just did not respond?
Sorry, they did not see any need for the additional staff.
Have any issues been identified within the audit reports received within the last 6 months? Thank you.
Madam Chair, there were issues and corrective action was taken on the outcome, the queries.
Can you give an example?
The tagging.
You don't know offhand.
The tag. Hello, I don't know offhand. I believe it was with the tagging. I'm not too sure. I didn't really work with it. Madam Chair, we had some issues of the incorrect classification of expenditure. That was one of the queries.
And that has been addressed? What steps have been taken to ensure that that doesn't recur in this fiscal year?
We conducted a meeting with the staff, and we informed the check staff to thoroughly check the bills before they do the invoices and stuff.
Mrs. Harrod, might I ask, are you satisfied that the function of the internal audit is being carried out by somebody who is adequately trained and or experienced?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
So that the problems that you say that you have are really just limited to excessive workload. And has any effort been made to, apart from going to PMCD, has there been any effort to find support for that one functionary?
No.
No? Is there the possibility of doing it under contract employment?
We didn't really look at that option.
But it's an option that can be explored?
Good, yes. But you see, the contract vote, we don't have much funds under that vote. So that will be another issue there.
Yeah, but won't you then, I guess, in safe but, the utopian circumstances, we always have to balance funds against priorities. And having regard to the long-standing issue of you having to share the internal audit function with the Integrity Commission, if I remember well from your own submission, the person who is carrying out the audit function is just an audit assistant. Won't it therefore always be a question of prioritizing your vote against your needs? And therefore, I would want to ask, therefore, would you think that the auditing function for your department is an important one? Yes. Particularly in light, I don't think you have a tenders committee.
No.
No. And I would want to also suggest, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, when I look at what you've explained about your tagging procedure, and what I have seen as your submission about dealing with obsolete vehicles, it seems to me that it could be categorized as almost a subjective criteria. Yes? Yeah. So in that case, won't the internal audit function be of supreme importance to your entity? Okay? And therefore, it begs the question then why, if you have not got the response that you would like from PMCD as a accounting officer, why you haven't looked at the possibility of some other resolution, at least in the short term, for your difficulty.
Yes, that's the, I'll have to look at that.
Yes, Member Duki, I think you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair. It has to do with what you were talking about a while ago. In terms of correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of the PMCD making a determination that there is no need for additional staffing regarding this function, and you are saying based on your evaluation there is a need. Yes. So therefore, both evaluation cannot be correct. I said you are saying that there is a need, yes, and the PMCD is saying that there is no need. How did you go about making that determination that there is a need on your part? Because you stated excessive workload. How did you evaluate that? What type of appraisal, what type of evaluation would have been done to determine that there is in fact a need, and that the PMCD is not correct?
Yeah. Well, for a long time, this problem was present. And that PMCD report I'm speaking about, that was done a very long time ago. And at that time, there was a need, but they said that it didn't have a need, right, as you explained to me. But from that time to now, it has even grown even a bigger need now because staff has increased. There's a lot more functions, a lot more accounting responsibilities. So there's even a greater need now for that.
So regarding this function, there's a job description for it?
Yes.
And as well as a person specification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Bodo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Sarat, I'm understanding that determination by the PMCD, you said was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So have you made any recent efforts to have this corrected?
No.
In terms of approaching PMCD again?
No.
Would you agree that perhaps this is appropriate and necessary at this time?
Yes, to re-submit to them, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to find out, Mr. Serret, in addition to the financial regulations and the Exchequer and Audit Act and the Regulation 55 that you will furnish us, what controls, systems or mechanisms are in place to ensure that you discharge your responsibility as accounting officer in terms of accountability, transparency, and value for money within the expenditure overall done by the Office of the President?
Madam Chair, the accounting staff, we have the check staff, and the audit with the quarterly reports. We regularly check the vote books to ensure that the releases doesn't go beyond the allocation. That is done by the check staff on a regular basis. And
Expenditure above the allocation?
both, because the releases cannot cross the allocation as well, yeah, and the expenditure.
Thank you. Member Mark?
Madam Chair, through your good self. Mr. Serrat, the PMCD, Public Management Consulting Division, how long ago did the PMCD submitted its report to the office in which it disagreed with the office that there would have been a need for an expanded internal audit unit? How long?
I'll direct the question to Ms. Lal.
Senator Mark, and with your leave, Madam Chair. My apologies. Just to put some perspective on this issue, the arrangement for the Office of the President to audit the accounts of the Integrity Commission was made as a result of Cabinet Minute number 1114 of the 26th of May, 1988. So that recommendation was made that long ago. And since then, as far as I'm aware, the Integrity Commission has grown perhaps by 60 persons over the past few years, and it has obviously put a strain on our resources. I am aware that in 2012, under the remit of former President Richards, a letter was written to the Comptroller of Accounts, I believe, requesting that the two entities remain separate and apart for accounting purposes. And nothing came out of that request. In addition to that, I think there were calls informally, I'm not sure if there were formal calls to the Comptroller of Accounts to have the separation, obviously for integrity purposes, and the fact that the President appoints the Integrity Commission and all those other conflicts that are present, and it has fallen on deaf ears. I'm not sure if there is going to be a renewed call, although I think there should be, and I will certainly make that suggestion to Mr. Surratt.
I ask, when was the report submitted by the PMCD in which there was a disagreement with the submission for an expansion of the internal audit function? When was that report submitted to the Office of the President? I'm trying to determine the period of time, because you only have one person, an audited assistant, dealing with so many important functions and responsibilities at the same time. One person cannot do that, properly speaking.
As far as I'm aware, I'm not sure about the report, and I don't think there was a report that was issued. I don't know if a formal letter was written by the Comptroller of Accounts, but in 2012, a letter was written by former President Richards, and I believe it was on that occasion and pursuant to that request in 2012 that it was determined that there wasn't a need for the separation between the auditing functions. And since then, there hasn't been anything further.
Madam Chair, bear with me. I am not dealing with separation of functions. That's a separate matter. And we can deal with that. Whether the President should be conducting, the President's office, that is, should be dealing with both the integrity and the Office of the President, or for auditing purposes. I am not on that. I am simply asking, based on the submission made by Mr. Surratt, there is a woefully inadequate level of staffing at the internal audit level of the Office of the President. And there are several functions and responsibilities that the office would have a responsibility for executing. So what I'm asking is that, having regard to the importance of the internal audit function, you are claiming, not your good self, but the accounting officer, that submissions were made to expand that staff. And the response was, there was no need by the PMCD. I'm simply asking how long ago that took place, and also how many requests were made subsequent to that in order to address this lacuna in the system. That is all I'm asking.
Madam Chair, I can't remember the exact date of the request, because that was with former secretaries long before me. First was the O&M, when it was the O&M report. That was, I think, 1989, that the data report. And the PMCD could have been about 15 years ago. And that's our average working with. And that was the last request made, about 15 years ago.
Okay, so members, Member Ramrat, I will just allow one last question on this issue, and I think we should really move along as far as the inquiry is concerned.
I just want to say, it seems as though you've established that the internal audit staffing is inadequate. Who directs the internal audit assistant? And when last have you had a comprehensive internal audit of the office?
Madam Chair, we never did any review of the audit system.
No, I'm really targeting the issue of an internal audit exercise. In your recollection, apart from the work, we recognize that the Auditor General does a sample on specific areas. In your recollection, has there been a comprehensive internal audit exercise within the Office of the President?
Madam Chair, direct question to the Assistant Secretary.
Madam Chair, I'll take this opportunity to refer to the attachments to our submission in relating the matter about the audit work program. That consists of all the financial documents that are audited. And this consists of the work program that the internal auditor would have had to adapt to or work with within the period of time in any given audit. So this would be like a comprehensive audit that will be conducted every quarter. But there's also ongoing work in the audit department. So, for example, application for the grant of credits will be checked on an ongoing basis, once a month or twice a month or however. You would have arrears that would be checked ongoing, that would not be quarterly. So I hope that should answer the question.
Yeah, just so that on a matter that I would return to, which is overseas travel, that would be an area of the department that has been subject to regular or periodic internal audit?
Well, no, it would not be regular, like ongoing, but it would be involved in the quarterly audit reports, just like all the financial records in terms of auditing the subsidiary records. That will fall into that category for the quarterly reports.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you'd permit me to go back a bit to the inventory control and the auditing. I'm a little concerned about, well, the use of the crest. Is it that, well, am I correct in saying that the crest is typically only used on non-perishable items?
Yes.
Okay. And all items which bear the crest would be in an inventory register? Because the crest, by its nature, would only be put on items of a particular value. So are they all covered in a register?
Yes.
Now, again, there have been reports in social media and elsewhere of the crest being used on consumable items such as chocolates and beverages. Now, would these have been considered, well, perishable or non-perishable in the use of the crest on these items? And would these items then have been recorded on the register and their consumption or disposal recorded likewise?
With respect to the use of the crest, as far as I'm aware, it was never used on perishable items. It's used on napkins, cutlery, and so on. The chocolates, I think it was an isolated situation where it was given to members of the diplomatic corps at a function. But the crest was a label on the casing in which the chocolate came. So it was never on the chocolate. It was on the case of the chocolate. And I think those things may have been inventoried as well.
Okay, well, one final question. So the more valuable items that bear the crest, would they also be tagged, or would the crest sort of replace then the tagging that is used for, well, some of your valuable assets?
Yes. Yes.
The tagging on the chocolate would not be done.
I'm not speaking to the perishable consumables, but the items that generally bear the crest. So certain assets, certain valuable assets, like
Yes,
crystal
generally,
whatnot, that
yes,
generally bear the
yes.
crest. Are they also tagged, or is it that the crest is used to supplement then the use of tagging? Is it used as an
No,
alternate to
they
tagging?
would be tagged.
Some of them are also tagged.
Yes. Besides the crest, they would also be tagged.
Okay, thank you.
Just one final question on the issue of the crest. I understand that the use of the presidential crest is governed by an act of parliament. Are you aware of that? And it is solely at the discretion of the office of the president, so that you are in a position under that act of parliament to determine what items will carry the crest and what items will not. But that you have been using the crest for tagging and identification purposes as part of the function, but at the same time you're using the crest for official functions as well. But that the use of the crest is entirely within your discretion. Okay, very well, thank you.
Okay, and just one thing, just to bring some clarification, I don't think the issue here, with all due respect, had to do with the use of the crest. I think the crest came up because what we were told is crest was used to identify things that would appear to be perishable to be non-perishable. Okay? And I just wanted to ask, in terms of the answer given by Ms. Lal, if, and I know Mr. Sarrett, you may not have come with this, if you could in writing by the end of next week, clarify to us, because she said she thinks that the chocolates were entered into the inventory register, all right, which would mean that they move now from perishables to non-perishables. So if you could verify that for us in writing. And in terms of if these things are perishables and they're in the inventory register, or even if they're not, are they also viewed by the internal audit process? Okay? So if we could have the response to that in writing within a week from today's date. I now move on to Member Mark.
Mr. Sarrett, is there a conflict of interest policy at the Office of the President?
Could you repeat the question, please, Senator Mark?
No, I'm asking whether there is a conflict of interest policy in existence within the governance structure at the Office of the President.
Mark. As far as I'm aware, and I've just confirmed, there's no particular document that speaks to conflict of interest, but we are guided by best practices and what obtains in the rest of the ministries, as far as practicable.
So, may I ask also, when it comes to the office engaging personnel, employing personnel, do you, when you say you follow the best practice, in what, could you give us a reference? Is it the Integrity Commission has a clear policy on conflict of interest? Would that be followed?
Yes.
And is there any instances that you recall of conflicts arising? And if they did, how did you handle them?
There had no instance of conflict of interest.
There's been no
instances? As far as I know, no. As far as I know.
Thank you, Madam.
Okay, Member Coffey.
Madam Chair, I would direct Mr. Sarrett to his written submissions under accountability and transparency. Question 9. It says, is there a framework governing conflict of interest despite the framework? Then it asks what measures are used to address conflicts of interest once identified. And the answers are not applicable. I just want to get an idea of what you meant by not applicable.
There's not a, this one. Yeah. There's not a framework, as Ms. Lal said, but it's just good practices that we follow, not a written framework as such.
Okay. Let me turn to the submissions on contract employment. And the question asks, describe the recruitment and selection process, including the criteria used to hire persons on contracts. And your response is, recruitment and selection process of the contracted workers were not in compliance with the Chief Personnel Officer memorandum by the accounting officer due to the urgency of the President's request. Could you expand on that? Well, one, since you have no conflict of interest policy, it means that you or the office holder can hire anybody they wish. Am I correct?
No.
All right. So when you say that the selection processes were not in compliance with the CPO's circular memorandum, what do you mean? In what instances were the selection processes not in compliance with the CPO's circular memorandum?
Madam Chair, first of all, let me say that it's circular memorandum by the former accounting officer. Well, what person before me? Wasn't really me. The former accounting officer.
Excuse me, Mr. Sarah, we didn't get that? I'm sorry.
The reply I gave is that recruitment and selection process of the contracted workers were not in compliance with the Chief Personnel Officer's circular memorandum by the former accounting officer due to the urgency of the President's request. Right?
Okay, so I'm trying to get in what ways were they not in compliance, and what would be the urgent situations in which persons were hired, and an example of the persons who were hired based on these urgent situations.
Just could you give me a moment, please? Just
Thank you very much for your patience. Because, where is this? Let me see. When His Excellency the President came into office maybe 3 years ago, there was no legal officer, there was no communications officer, there were no executive advisors that were attached to the office of the President. In fact, there is no HR department at all in the office of the President. And that situation has persisted to date. The recruitment and selection process that is required by the circular memorandum that came to our knowledge maybe about a year ago is that positions ought to be advertised and they go through an interview process as is customary in a public service. I believe that when His Excellency came into office, And because of the lack of those resource personnel and the fact that he required their services, I think what happened is that applications were sent in, and because there is no HR department, His Excellency the President.
Ms. Lal, I just want to guide us here.
Sure.
I really don't want it to appear that this committee is asking about any particular office holder. What we are looking at are the structures you all have and what has been employed by the accounting officer, and it may not be this particular one. It's a post, right, that subsists and outlasts the life of the particular office holder. So, I would really wish to warn you in terms of the response that we're getting, because this is not the remit of the committee at all. Okay, and I think the question is very clear. There's an answer, and we just want to know what occurred, why it occurred, okay, in terms of what the role and responsibility of the accounting officer is, and therefore what structures have been put in place since then. And it all relates to the conflict of interest question where you said you have no framework, and then you came back and said the word in framework, you have a policy. Okay, it's that we're trying to understand.
Thank you for your guidance, Madam Chair. The selection process that has been employed in the Office of the President, applications were sent in, and the accounting officer at the time, and His Excellency the President, and who else may have sat on that interviewing process, and other officers would have sat on an interviewing process and selected officers to be employed in contract positions. And so it didn't comply with the Chief Personnel Officer's circular, because it had to be, the positions were required to be advertised before selection.
True, Madam Chair. So you're saying there were applications, although there were no advertisements, people just applied and they were interviewed?
Yes, when there are applications on file for any number of reasons, to fill any number of vacancies that His Excellency the President is required to fill. And so there were applications on file that were consulted, and thereafter the process of selection was made.
Okay, so in your submission, I am seeing a list of persons employed under contract employment. So I am to take it that none of those persons responded to an advertisement. They were employed through that process that you just explained. It's the list of contract positions for fiscal year 2017.
Madam Chair, this list was is what we intended to advertise first of all, but it is there in the draft estimates as what we require. And if we got the finances for it, then we would go through the recruitment process of advertising and the interviews and.
No, I'm speaking to the names that are accompanying the positions, because there are names here as well as positions.
Yeah, these officers were already, not everybody, but the 6 positions in all that existed before. All the rest, as you see, is vacant.
Okay. I just have a few more questions.
Yes, Member Coffey.
I see there are 2 positions for executive advisor.
Yes.
So the president has 2 executive advisors?
Yes.
Okay. And now, yes, the office, sorry. Now, somewhere it says here that no further filling of contract positions is expected at this time. Right? So I could, that, and that's your response, I could take that. Right. Right. So when I see here the position of personal assistant and it's vacant, I can expect that nobody will be filling that position at any point in time. So there's no personal assistant to the president right now. All right. So then I go on to the official overseas travel for fiscal year 2017, and I see you have made you have made provision for travel by the personal assistant to the president and advisor. So if you don't intend to fill the position, how could you have made arrangements for them to be accompanying the office holder? For that, and there's personal among the staff. They're not on the list. It says, yeah, but if it's there, it needs to be on the list.
Madam Chair, this was just a projection on the 27 official overseas travel, but as regards the fiscal cuts, that's why we just went along with the 6 positions.
Okay, thank you. So, again, this is based on your submission. In question 6, you say there is no performance management system in place. And question 7, there is no personal performance assessment conducted. And this is for the staff of the president. And I just want to refer back to the request for PMCD's assistance to get you additional positions. So given that there is no performance management system in place and no performance assessment conducted by the Office of the President, are you in a position to ask for additional staff or resources, since given the absence of any kind of appraisal, you won't be in a position to say that you need additional staff?
Yes, I will be in a position to request additional staff.
Oh, no.
Through the Service Commissions Department, not through contract.
No, I'm asking those questions because I listened at length to the request being made for PMCD's assistance in development position, either contract or on the establishment. And as the minister responsible for PMCD, I know that in making an analysis, they would first look at the workflow statistics, performance appraisals, whatever work is done. And now this shows an absence of any performance appraisals, of any performance management system in place. So, and that's why I'm asking, are you really in a position to say that you need additional staff or additional resources, since you have no interviews, no applications, you do not invite applications, and you do not monitor or do any kind of performance management of the staff that you have? How do you determine the need?
Thank you, member. And with the leave of Madam Chair, I'd like to answer this question. I was told that the performance appraisals are done for all public servants. The only persons for whom performance appraisals are not done would be the 6 contract officers. And so in relation to that, if there is a requirement for performance appraisals to be done in respect of the contract officers, it's something that the accounting officer is more than willing to look into and employ. And I'm very grateful that we've gotten this opportunity to speak to you so that maybe we could make additional calls for those additional officers. Thank you.
My final question. Now, you have 24 contractual positions, and you're operating now with 6. And among the 6 are 2 executive advisors. Can you explain to me whether the absence of the other 18 vacancies that exist, is it because you are quite happy with the 6 that you have? Is it because of the budgetary constraints, or is it because you have not been able to recruit persons to fill the 24 positions, the 18 positions?
The budgetary constraints.
So, but you can pay for 2 executive advisors and you leave all the other positions empty, vacant?
The executive advisors, they will perform other functions that could cover some of these that we didn't get. So we cannot do with what we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to go more into the issue of conflict of interest. Now, you made a statement that there is no conflict of interest. However, you cannot make that categorical statement in the absence of a requirement for officers to declare whether or not there is a conflict. So I guess my first question would be, is there some requirement then of workers when they are employed and when they sign up to declare where they perceive a conflict of interest in any situation that arises? Is there that requirement on officers?
Madam Chair, there is not really a written policy, but best practices, other senior staff, if any situation would arise, we would be able to arrest the situation. just based on best practices.
Okay, so for example, the officers who are involved in the analysis of the procurement process, then of the bids, if they have an interest in one of the company that bids, would they come out and say up front, okay, I have an interest in this particular company, and recuse themselves from that from the discussion? Is that the understood practice? Or another example, perhaps, are there any relatives that work within the office, and would they declare their relationships so that we can ensure that, well, certainly that relatives would not be put in positions then where there could be a conflict arising? So is there that understanding, that practice within the office of the president, whereby persons do in fact come up front and declare a potential conflict, and that way you can treat with it accordingly?
Yes, but even though they may not come forward, but other officers, if they observe any situation like that, they would come and let the senior members know.
And if a conflict situation is so reported, then how would you treat with it?
Madam Chair, the situation hasn't happened in any time, but if it does, if it's a contractor, well, we will stop the contract, or if it's any with employment, well, we'll have to release the person.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Sarrett, I just want to ask one last question on this. In terms of the statement with respect to the recruitment and selection process, again, under contract employment, having not been complied with according to the memorandum, the circular memorandum, can I take it then that no persons have been employed under this vote since you took office in 2014?
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay, and I just wanted to ask, from what you have witnessed, what you've met, how then would have been the salary been set for these persons who were employed outside of the established procedure?
Madam Chair, the salary would be paid, well, in accordance with, in keeping with similar positions in the public service.
So the similar positions in the public service were looked at to fix the salaries.
Yes.
And they are in accordance with what obtains, or that was just used as a reference to the
Yes, like a guide.
so that they may exceed or it may be lower than what obtains in the public service?
No, not exceed.
They don't exceed. So they either on par or they lower.
On par, yes. Or
They
lower.
are on par. Yes?
And it will be, submitted to CPO for their approval for terms and conditions. So, and
Even though they
CPO
weren't in compliance with the memorandum, they were still submitted to CPO.
Yes, and cabinet for approval.
Okay. All right, Member Coffey?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Now, the process is, even if your recruitment process wasn't in conformity, to effect the payment, you would need the approval of the CPO for the position. And so what I'm trying to get is, since these positions were recruited and you would be given a contract, but the CPO needs to sign off at some point on the terms and conditions. So has the CPO signed off on the terms and conditions of any of the employees that we're talking about?
Yes, all 6.
All 6. So you have approved salaries and...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Member Mahabir?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I do want to extend a question that was raised by Minister Coffey, Member Coffey, with respect to the adequate staffing and the evaluation of the need for more staff. And the question I want to pose is this. The office that you represent discharges a number of functions. And I think it would benefit me, benefit the public to know what some of these functions are, if you could indicate to us what they are, and which functions would be more efficiently discharged if you had more staff. See, once I know that, I will then know, without any other staff evaluation exercise, the extent to which you need to improve your staffing. So could you indicate what are the functions currently discharged by the Office of the President which could be enhanced if you were given more staff by the relevant agency of the state?
Madam Chair, the accounting department, is that the function you speak about, Senator?
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm looking at an input-output analysis. The input are the resources you get from the state. The output would be the number of things that you do at your office. It would be the appointing of people to numerous boards. It would be the functions that you host, the various concepts. There are a number of matters that you deal with on a daily basis at your house. Those are the outcomes. Those are the things you have to do in the public interest. If you don't do them, then in fact the state won't run efficiently. We want the state mechanism to run efficiently. And in order to do that, you need the staffing. You have said you do not have the adequate staff. PMCD said that you have the adequate staff. I want to get from you, since you are on the floor on a daily basis, what are the functions which would be discharged more efficiently if you had the staff complement that you had requested?
Well, first of all, functions as regards the state functions, the national awards ceremony, we have the military medal awards, and There are various.
So you are quite aware of the various duties of President House, not just the function, but the duties. Is it in your opinion that these duties could be discharged more efficiently,
Yes.
quicker, if you had the staff?
The staff, yes.
How much more staff would you need to discharge the functions more efficiently? You see, that give us an estimate, or could you think about it and submit it in writing?
Yes, sure.
Because part of the inquiry is really to make agencies function very efficiently too. Okay.
Members, therefore, I would want to suggest that we move on. And I would want to invite Member Oliver on the issue of official entertainment to ask a few questions of the officials from the department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on the budgetary allocation, I mean, there's a significant decrease in what has been allocated. So how do you plan to manage during the year with the functions that you anticipate? Yeah.
Madam Chair. We, first of all, the contract positions, we are considering reducing staff, at least, and possible salary cuts. Well, not the public officers, but the contract officers. We will be looking at that, prioritizing needs in place of wants. Environments.
Well, I'm speaking specifically to official entertainment. No, so, yeah, official entertainment, how do you plan to manage with the reduced allocations?
Right. To prioritize.
Do you have any plans in place where we can, consolidate functions, reduce costs?
Yeah, reduce the functions and the cost and attendees to have less expenditure. So we'll use the. You want to finish? I'll pass it to finish answer the question.
With your leave, Member Oliver, one of the recent implementations that the President has undertaken is to, instead of catering out, for example, services.
I'm just sorry to intervene, and maybe this might be a very opportune time before Ms. Lal answers, to just remind all of us here that what we're looking at is the role of the accounting officer. I want to remind members and the officers of the department that we are prohibited from using the President's name to influence the committee, and additionally the conduct of the President or any other person performing that function shall not be raised. So that I again will ask Ms. Lal to take that into account in respect to her answer. We are here looking at the accounting officer and the way in which the accounting officer and the persons under him discharge their responsibility. Thank you.
Madam Chair, as I was.
Nixon had to repeat the question, or you know the question?
No, I know the question. Cutbacks on spending regarding, expenses associated with the functions. We will decrease the amount of functions for the year. Also, we are more doing internal catering instead of hiring caterers from outside. That was a great help with the cost and using
facilities of NAPA.
of Napa, yes, using the facilities of Napa instead of renting facilities, right, as well.
And I just want to, Mr. Serrett, refer to your response on the official entertainment, and in particular where you said that the, concerning the use of funds under this head, and to ask if there are instances of other persons who utilize the funds under these sub-items, and if there are instances, in what circumstances would that occur?
This, Madam Chair, this vote is strictly for the official entertainment, and no one else uses this vote. No.
Okay. We can proceed now to another item if there are no further questions. And I would want to suggest we go on to repairs and maintenance of equipment, sub-item 15. And I therefore invite Member Bodo to ask any questions which he may wish to ask.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed that there are quite a list of items here. What I would want some clarification on, if we look at some of these items in terms of, let's take the air conditioning units, for example. That would be a substantial repair and service cost, but perhaps that could be justified in terms of the number of units. Could you provide some clarification? Okay. The other item I'm looking at there is the cost for, I'm taking it that this is a replacement of fluorescent tubes and bulbs. Is that an annual replacement cost?
No. I beg your pardon, could you repeat the question?
No, I'm looking at the cost of $50,000 for fluorescent tubes and bulbs.
Oh, from the estimates? Yeah, that is a yearly, they would purchase, like they keep in stock.
Sorry?
They will keep it in stock. So whenever they have to do any change, any items like that, they go to the stock room and get these items. It's not changed on a need basis. It will be stocked.
Right, and could you indicate, perhaps, does this cover the entire?
Yes, the entire compound, the office, the house, and the cottage.
Okay. Just one more point in that regard, in regards to energy efficient lighting and, bulbs that last a long time and so on. Is any consideration being given to that in terms of the energy efficient
The type of
and
bulb, yes.
the environmentally friendly bulbs and so on?
Yes, yes.
And so that's taken into consideration?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam.
So let me ask something, Mr. Serrett, in terms of, again, looking at the bulbs and tubes, which are usually bought and stocked. Are these entered into the inventory register?
Yes.
Okay, so that the 50,000 is really an estimate.
Yes.
Would they, let's say for fiscal 2017, would you have carried over stock from, say, fiscal 2016? Or do you just annually buy a certain amount? Yeah, I'm sorry, your mic is not on, so you'll have to repeat.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes. We would take a stock check of what is bought forward and the difference to make the quota needed we will include that in the estimates.
Might I ask, this is a possible vote then from which violence can be made?
Yes.
All right. Okay, and then may I ask, in terms of what are the minor repairs and maintenance to be conducted on the official residence, and I'm using that term to include the main house and the cottage in fiscal year 2017?
With the house, we are not doing any work on that. When I say we, the office of the president, because that is undertaken by the Ministry of Works.
No.
Through the Prime Minister's office. The minor work that we will be doing, it would be on the cottage that was built to house the excellencies until the house was completed. So it would be minor things like, what, so you?
Like painting, Madam Chair, like plumbing, doing plumbing works, like if tank have to change, painting, plumbing work, like if a tank have to change.
So these would be repairs arising out of ordinary wear and tear?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And is painting done on a sort of systematic basis, once every 3 years, once every 5 years? How is that done?
Needs, like if
it's purely on a needs basis.
Yeah, needs basis.
So that is quite possible that this is just an allocation for an eventuality. There may not be.
No, Madam Chair.
There may not be any drawdown on this vote at all.
Well,
excuse me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Ask, you spoke about the Ministry of Works doing the work to the main residence. What sort of arrangement exists between the Ministry of Works and Transport and your function in terms of undertaking any repair work to the cottage or to the residence?
Madam Chair, the Ministry of Works, sometimes they do work for us as well on the cottage, but as regards the purchase of the material, we have to buy that. But there's the labor, they will supply the labor sometimes.
Okay, so that whenever you will engage the Ministry of Works, it's a question, they just provide the labor. Okay, and
yes.
What sort of, and if that is the case, then is your internal audit function included in that procurement process?
No.
No, and I might ask why?
It was never really a practice, and we never really implemented anything. And regards the shortage of staff as well.
Excuse me, I don't understand. I'm sorry.
No, I said it was never really a practice.
Yes.
Before.
All right.
And we never really put anything in place.
Okay.
For that.
So I just want to ask then, because we've heard before about you employing good practices in your procedures. What informs then good practice? What informs you that you are complying with good practice? Because here you're telling me of one instance that it is not a practice. What informs that you are abiding by good practice?
We depend on the control of the acting, Mr. Williams, to supervise these operations. And he will inform us as to what took place.
Okay. And therefore, you as accounting officer, what assures you that what Mr. Williams, and I don't want to say Mr. Williams, but the advice of the controller of house or the person undertaking that function accords with good practice, with best practice, what?
At times, I myself will take a walk to the cottage and actually see the job is completed.
So again, would I be correct in saying that a lot of the monitoring, a lot of the evaluation, a lot of the practices are really based on a subjective mechanism of one being of the accounting officer being satisfied? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Member Mahavir?
As you raised the issue about the cottage and the main house, Madam President, I'm just curious, because at the very outset, Mr. Serrat, you indicated that there was a shortage of office space for staff. And if you have a full staff complement, as you surmise that you may wish to have, you clearly would be overcrowded. I'd like to know one thing. For how long has the main house and the adjoining buildings been under repair? When do you expect it to be finished? And when it is done, will that satisfy all the office space requirements that you need?
Just for Mr. Serrat's protection, I wonder whether that is an answer within his remit, because based on the responses here as far as the main house, my understanding is that that is the Ministry of Works and Transport. So maybe, Member Mahabir, you might want to ask the question another way.
Okay. The question I want to ask in another way is, well, I don't know if you have historical evidence with respect to the length of time that that particular historic building has been under repair. But the issue which arises is this: there is a need for office space. Do you then do you have any ability or opportunity to rent office space elsewhere while the current facilities are under construction?
Madam Chair, currently, we bought containers, 2 containers to house the special branch officers and military officers from the garage and, well, in service to the president. We have them housed in containers, but that still isn't sufficient.
Madam Chair, I don't understand. You are housing people in containers. Is that, to use your term, best practice? Containers, is that a normal practice within the sphere of government?
No, it's not, but budgetary constraints. Space, we have, well, of course, the containers are equipped with air condition and
So basically, you are using empty. I'm trying to imagine what is happening. You are using empty containers which people use to import things. You have converted it.
Offices.
And you have converted those containers into offices.
Yes.
And that now is sufficing for the various functions, uses, obligations of the people who occupy your organization. Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
Member Duki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of maintenance, Mr. Serrat, do you employ or engage any preventative maintenance program or interventions?
Could you repeat the question, please?
In terms of maintenance, do you employ or engage any particular preventative maintenance intervention or program?
Currently, we minister members of the works department. For example, the electrician, he would do maintenance work on the compound as regards like electrical work. With the other maintenance, the fleet, if there's a need to do any further work, he will engage the other works personnel to do whatever is required. We don't really have a work plan as such.
Okay, I just wanted to ask Mr. Serret, in terms of sub-item 26, how is expenditure under sub-item 26 monitored by the accounting officer?
Madam Chair, expenditure under this vote is controlled by the use of the vote book, the releases as against the expenditure. And in compliance with the draft estimates.
So I take these are your checks and balances. Okay, so how often are these checks conducted? This is done on a daily basis?
When bills are being passed, not really daily, but like on a weekly basis.
And this is checked by whom? The accounting officer?
The check staff.
The check staff?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a standard list of expenses for the establishment?
Standard list? Mm-hmm.
The list that was submitted. That was just like a projection.
Only the projection in the draft estimates.
So that historically, is there a standard list of
No.
No. Okay, might I invite Member Coffey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to refer to your answers under sub-item 26. Which officers are entitled to utilize funds from expenses of present establishment? And your response is that the present under the SRC for salaries for household, deliberated staff, and household expenses. Now, we've read reports about the Office of the President making payments under the SRC. Now, do you check to ensure that every payment that is made from the present establishment, that it is in conformity with the SRC's provisions? And do you ensure that there is correspondence from the Secretary to the SRC before you undertake the payments under the establishment? What's the process that is used?
The SRC would be payments to the president, salaries, allowances, etc. So that the check staff will verify that these payments are made and for the correct amount and entered on the per-record cards, which will be audited and checked on the quarterly by the auditor. And the check staff will check it well whenever payments are made under that vote.
So the letter from the CPA, who is the secretary for the SRC, saying that not all the expenses paid had the approval of the SRC, that would be wrong?
Sorry. Once it is in the SRC, Legislative Review Commission document, once it is in that, that was approved by the CPO.
No, I was just referring to a recent news report where it was stated, and through you, Madam Chair, that payments were made that were not approved by the SRC.
Madam Chair, we have not received any copy of that document, so I can't really assess what it's about for this moment.
I didn't want to get too specific. Right?
And I would advise that you shouldn't.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Mark?
We still on repairs, Madam Chair, or have we have gone?
Well, we moved on, but I will allow one more question because I want us to be.
Yeah.
I want us to be mindful of the time.
Yes. Yeah. No. If we have moved on to other items.
We're really under sub-item 26 and moving on.
Okay.
Yes?
Sub-item.
Member Amran.
Okay.
Moving on.
You're leaving sub-item 26. I think there's one more question allowed by Member Kafi, and then we'll take Member Amran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we had dealt with the contracts, and we went through the list of officers that are on contract, and we've moved to repairs and maintenance on buildings. Now, I haven't seen any provision for the retention of staff dealing with procurement, and the procurement legislation is about to become effective. What plans do you have for the retaining or employing staff to deal with the procurement issues?
Madam Chair, could we submit it in writing at a later date?
I would have thought, because we asked a question originally on procurement when you said there'd been no training. So I would have thought that this is something that you would have come, equipped to answer, Mr. Sarah.
Madam Chair. We'll be seeking training to accommodate that request.
So that there would be training of current staff? That's what the answer is?
Additional staff.
No, current.
Current staff, sorry. To do with the procurement.
Member Mark.
I wanted to ask Mr. Sarrett whether a specific allocation for training to address the implementation and operationalization of the procurement legislation, whether that was specifically considered in your allocation for 2016-2017. Is there a specific item under training that deals with that whole issue of the operationalization of the procurement legislation?
No, the training vote wasn't specifically for that. It was just a broad request. But we could allocate the funds towards that if we need to train under that.
No, it's not about if you need to. There is a specific time set by the government, the 31st of March, 2017, where 247 entities, including the office of the president, supposed to be ready for that transition, really operationalization. So I'm just asking, you know, what time frame have you given yourself in order to get this particular aspect of your work going to meet that requirement?
Well, we will be using the funds from the training vote. We request funding, and as regards the time frame, well, as soon as possible.
May I ask Mr. Sarah, do you have a training plan for 2017?
No.
So that you're not even certain whether the $25,000, I think, that's your allocation? Is that your allocation for training?
Madam Chair, we only got $25,000, so we may have to do environment to accommodate the.
Yeah, but having
training.
regard to the deadline, we, maybe 10 weeks, I just assuming, then much more than that left. In terms of, you have a deadline, you have $25,000. You've just said to the committee, you propose to train your existing staff to meet that deadline. Is it that any plan has been worked on up to today as you are before the committee?
No.
Okay. Could I suggest then that it's just occurred to you as you're before the committee? Yes or no?
Yeah, but I didn't really, I didn't get.
Can I suggest it's only now that you're before the committee that it has occurred
Yes.
to you? And therefore, could I then ask you, within a week from today, to submit to the committee the training plan for the putting the office in readiness?
Yes.
For the procurement.
Procurement, yes.
Legislation.
Yes.
Yes, members, could we then move on and therefore invite any questions that you all may wish to ask under sub-item 27. And I would therefore direct my first invitation to Member Ramraj.
Thank you, Chairman. As I indicated earlier, I would eventually come back to this official overseas travel sub-item 27. But I'll also, because they might be related, touch on sub-item 98, overseas travel facilities, direct charges. Mr. Surratt, you're familiar with the expenditure, the estimates of expenditure approved by the Parliament for this fiscal year? For the Office of the President? And you're familiar with the 27 estimate for official overseas travel?
Yes.
What is that figure? And
900,000.
And under official overseas travel, who is entitled to access that facility? Okay.
Only the President.
And in response to the request from the committee, you submitted, dated January 4, 2017, a submission with details the expected expenditure of the Office of the President for this fiscal year. There's a document of January 4, 2017, setting out estimates of expenditure. So I'm looking at the one for overseas travel, which was submitted. And the details are in an attachment to that document. And I'm seeing a figure of $7,925,000 as the estimate expenditure under official overseas travel. So how do you reconcile the fact that in this fiscal year, for this fiscal year, towards the end of in October last year, the Parliament approved 900,000 under this line item, and in January 2017, into the fourth month of the fiscal year, have submitted to us a projected expenditure of $7.925 million. How do you reconcile those two?
Madam Chair, through you, the official overseas travel is for His Excellency, as well as, the aide-de-camp and the other accompanying security. So the 900,000 is really much under the requested figure, but this is only a projection. So I have to discuss it with His Excellency. And many of the trips that are here, we will have to cut most of the what is listed here.
But let me ask you this question. As a matter of prudent fiscal management by an accounting officer, mindful that in October 2016, the Parliament has approved a figure of $900,000. Would you say that it is proper execution of the duties of an accounting officer to submit to this committee a projected expenditure that is just about 6 times or 7 times what the Parliament has approved? I mean, an estimate may have a variation within 10 or 15% up or down, but when I received this document, I was absolutely confounded by the fact that the very first trip, a trip by 2 to Europe, accompanied by 2 minor children, an aide-de-camp, and 2 security officers, a personal assistant, and an advisor, that one of several projected trips was near double the sum approved by the Parliament. And it crossed my mind whether somebody had lost their mind. And it would take serious whittling down for this to become 900,000. And the function of this committee, as the chairman set out at the opening, is to track the use of the allocations provided by Parliament and where appropriate to make recommendation. But quite honestly, as a member of this committee, I find it difficult to countenance a recommendation that would assist you and your team in understanding that under no circumstances can a $900,000 allocation become a $7.9 million expenditure. And the other area of clarification I wanted related to the overseas travel facilities. I just wanted to know who is entitled first to ask you whether you were familiar with the allocation made by Parliament for this fiscal year. Are you familiar with the allocation made? And what is the figure? 900,000. This is under 98, sub-item 98, because I did indicate that I'm going to ask in relation to the 2 items one time. So in relation to 98, are you familiar with the figure approved by the Parliament?
$1 million.
Okay. And are you familiar with the details you submitted in respect of the estimate use of that line item? And that is in your January 4, 2017 submission.
$6.448 million.
But let me ask you before you go into that. Who is entitled to use this sub-item 98 overseas travel facilities direct charges? Who is entitled to use that?
His Excellency on vacation.
So I am wrong in my understanding that sub-item 98, overseas travel facilities dash direct charges, is a line item approved by Parliament for monthly paid officers in a division, a department, or a ministry who are going overseas? Am I wrong in my understanding of it? So it would be wrong for this line item 98 overseas travel facilities dash direct charges to be used by His Excellency.
His Excellency is within the purview of the Salary Review Commission, and he's a multi-paid officer, and he's paid from the Consolidated Fund. So I think he qualified to be under this vote.
You think so, or you know so?
I know so.
Very well. And you are familiar with what you have provided as the estimate for the use of that facility for this fiscal year?
Yes.
And what is that figure? And as I asked in respect of sub-item 27, I ask again, as an accounting officer in January 2017, well aware that the Parliament has approved $1 million, that you are projecting an expenditure of $6.4 million in travel, you consider that to be the prudent management of the fiscal affairs?
Under 27, the 900,000 is very low.
Is?
Very low for the state visits.
Yeah.
Right? It's really very low.
But it is what Parliament has allocated, right?
Yes. But this was a projection before, after consultation. I didn't, well, come up with this figure on my own. Right? But the figure is really high.
Let me just
900,000 is low as well.
Let me just move on. In the official overseas travel, the direct charges,
98.
You've given us a breakdown of the projected expenditure. And you have, for example, let us look, for example, at the proposed trip to Europe. Are you there with me? Yes. And you're projecting to 4 tickets per trip and 2 visits to Europe this year. And India, you are projecting the cost of those tickets to be $680,000 TT. You're projecting the per diem allowances in total, and I hope this figure is correct, but I'm reading from your document, to be $1,038,960. Warm clothing allowance transport, entertainment, the use of VIP lounge at Heathrow and Gatwick airports. And I would point out to you that the cost of the use of the lounge is $44,400. The use of the lounge in London, which you project to be $17,982. And I want to ask you this question. These items that are included as the estimate under sub-item 98, how do those items compare with what the SRC has approved for overseas travel of the holder of the office of the president? The SRC, I'm sure you're aware, has approved something called overseas travel facilities. And in that, we have certain items listed. The first one is entitlement of passengers to the maximum value of 2 adult first class or equivalent class return airfare to the UK annually for the president's spouse, if any, and dependent children, if any, under the age of 18. So, how do we as a committee reconcile what the SRC has approved and the sub-items there with what is in the projected estimate under 98? For example, I don't see the SRC in its approval approving the use of a VIP lounge. So the authority to incur that expenditure must come from somewhere else. And I wanted to know if you can assist me in finding the authority for expenditure of that nature, which are not covered in the SRC approval. The guy, the president.
Follow-up question I would ask them on that same issue.
Madam Chair, these are projections. And when there's actual travel, the breakdown, well, the figures will be different because it's just a projection. It's forwarded to Cabinet for their approval, and only then will the funds be be utilized.
But let me ask you this question. Who prepares the submission to Cabinet?
The administrative manager. The administrative manager.
Of?
The Office of the President.
And the administrative manager will be guided by what documents, in terms of what goes into the Cabinet note. I sit in Cabinet, for example, and I've seen Cabinet notes relating to travel. And you as accounting officer, would you have oversight of that to be able to say? Because I imagine you have seen what you have submitted. And if you are estimating that there'd be multiple trips to Europe under this vote, and there'd be charges like the charges for the use of the VIP lounges and so on, that as an accounting officer, you would know your authority for including those in the expenses to be incurred in travel. So it is not for the administrative manager. I think it is for you, the accounting officer. And if Mr. Serret, you cannot give the committee the answer today, I would be happy to receive it at a later date in writing. But I would say this: when I saw the submission, as I did when I saw the submission under 27, when I saw the submission under 98, it caught my attention because I could not reconcile the Parliament approving a sum of $1 million for this fiscal year, and your submission to us being $6.4 million, covering trips to Europe, several to the USA, one to the Bahamas, to Mexico, 2 to China. And I could not reconcile, given my knowledge of the SRC approval, I could not reconcile some of the intended expenditure included in the breakdown. And I will close with this question. You made the point earlier. I'll close with 2 questions. You made a point earlier about vacation. And I just wanted to be absolutely clear. Is there any part of the estimates approved by the Parliament for the purpose of meeting the vacation expenses of the holder of the office of President? And what expenses are paid by the state in relation to vacation, and what is the authority for those payments?
Member, might I just intervene and ask if your last 2 questions, if they could be put to Mr. Serret,
for sure.
and he will supply
Yes,
the answers in writing within a week of those
yes, and then
2 questions.
Yes, thank you. And the last question goes back to my earlier question and answered by Ms. Mahadev, which was the frequency of the audits. I asked about whether a comprehensive internal audit has ever been done. And in answer, I was told that on a quarterly basis, internal audits are done. And I asked specifically whether the internal audits have ever addressed the area of overseas travel. And I just want to repeat the question and ask if you can research and advise the committee whether there's been any finding of internal audit, from internal audit in relation to the use of sub-item 27, official overseas travel, and the use of sub-item 98, overseas travel facilities, direct charges. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Mahabir?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And I needed clarification with respect to an issue raised by Minister Rambarat, again on sub-item 27 and 98. The sub-item 27, official overseas travel, estimated at $900,000, and then sub-item 98, overseas travel facilities, direct charges, $1 million. The figures you presented really are something close, it's over $6 million. And I need clarification with respect to official overseas travel. The vote here is 900,000. But if during the course of the fiscal year, these have been approved by the Parliament, if during the course of the fiscal year, there are certain overseas functions which, in the opinion of your office, His Excellency must attend, is it normal procedure to make requests to the Cabinet during the course of the year so that there could be an expansion of this $900,000? And if so, does the expansion of the $900,000, say Cabinet approved, does it have to come from a virement of the overall vote to the Office of His Excellency, or is it coming from other sources? Could you enlighten me on that?
Internally, we can do a virement. Internally, we could do a virement and then request the funds from the budgets division. And then the Cabinet note will be forwarded for approval to the Cabinet.
Okay, but it means that you have to stay, Mr. Serrat, within the overall allocation approved by the Parliament, or can you exceed that with permission from the Minister of Finance?
We can exceed.
Okay, and has it been so in the past?
Yes.
Oh.
Mr. Serrat, I would just like if you, in writing, could explain to us the difference between sub-item 27 and sub-item 98 for our guidance. Okay, but we'll take that in writing because I think we are going to send some supplemental questions to you. And just for clarification, both sub-item 27 and 98 need approval for virements. Is that correct?
No, the virements would be to put additional funds into the vote, taken from another vote.
But you would need approval in both cases?
No, internal. We can do without approval.
I don't know. I am being guided here by the draft estimates 2017 approved by the Parliament, Head 01 President, and there's a note 27 official overseas travel, okay, sub-item 27, and a note explanation approval of the Minister of Finance is required for virement 2, and from the sub-item, that is 27. Sub-item 98. Approval of the budget division is required for virements from sub-items 98 and 99. So that I don't know if...
I thought you said from Cabinet, sorry. From the... Yes, through the budget division. Yes.
And in terms of this, while it is you may have had the practice that virements are allowed, in terms of your role as the accounting officer, would you not think it prudent that a revision be done of your estimates, okay, subsequent to Cabinet, to the approval of the Parliament of your actual allocations. Yes? And if that is prudent, is that done?
Yes.
And when is it done? Because the budget would have been approved in October. Your submission is January 4th. So when is that done?
At the mid-year review in March, April.
When your revision of the allocation.
Oh, my revision.
Yeah.
But isn't the mid-year review
We will request.
done after you've had your allocation, and there may be need to reconsider your allocation in mid-year? Not, but this is your allocation here. So we're talking now about a review of your estimates with respect to how then am I going to manage what I've got. Is that done?
Not documented, Madam Chair, but we go through the estimates like after and see, well, how best we could use whatever funds that we got.
Therefore, it means that you continue to operate on paper with what your estimates were prior to what your allocation is, so that there is no guiding document to ensure that you're operating within your allocation.
The vote book is our guidance as to we don't go beyond the allocation.
You're planning to spend 7 million in one instance, 7.9 million. You only have 900,000, you only have 0.9. Wouldn't it then be prudent to sit and say, how am I going to manage this 0.9 up front, than to wait until you exhaust the 0.9 to find out how you're managing the next, whatever your other plans are with the intended 6 million?
Yes, as soon as we get the draft estimates approved, very soon after, probably about a few weeks after, we would go through it to see, well, how to readjust
And
to
therefore,
suit.
the question is then why then send us your estimates and not send us your revised plan based on your allocation?
Yeah, I understand, yes.
So seeing that it's been done, could that also be submitted to us within a week from today?
No, Madam Chair, that would only be done under certain votes, not all the votes, right? The
Okay,
more
but our inquiry
affected
here
ones.
is only with respect to certain votes.
Yeah.
So that anything we discuss here really would be limited to these
those votes.
certain votes. Okay?
Sure.
Thank you. And can I therefore suggest to the committee that we, because the time is late, and if we can just quickly, if there are any questions under sub-item 66, that I can invite any questions to assist us, and subhead 03, minor equipment purchases. Members, if we not readily available with questions, might I then ask that we already have to send some supplemental questions that we address it there. Okay? And therefore, in winding up, I think there's one overall question that I would allow Member Mark before we wind up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just would have liked to ask Mrs. Sarrett and his team whether the Office of the President has a strategic plan in an effort to address a number of the challenges that you have outlined in the last few hours. And if you do, could you advise us what period that plan covers? And whether you're aware of any previous strategic plan outside of the one that you may want to tell us about that would guide the activities, the vision, mission, direction, objectives, and of course values of the Office of the President. Would you want to share with us if the Office of the President has a strategic plan and for what period of time that plan covers?
Mr. Sarat, in terms of, would you like us to remind you of the question?
I could remember the question a bit, Madam Chair. Based on the information that we have gathered this afternoon, we would definitely come together and put up a plan, especially with the short staffing and the lack of space at the office right now. I will go into details with it right now, so I would like to know if you all would take it in a written submission at a later date.
Madam Chair, I'm sure that Mrs. Sarrett would appreciate that our overall task or goal is to lift you up, lift up the Office of the President to see to what extent, based on your submissions, there are clear weaknesses, deficiencies, and how we as a parliamentary committee can seek to provide recommendations to the Office of President to enhance its operations, to make it more effective efficient and accountable, and to deal with, of course, some of the obvious challenges and deficiencies that you would have outlined today. So what I would like, with the permission of the chair, to submit to you is if there are firm recommendations, suggestions that you would like to submit to the chair for consideration, so that in submitting our report, we will take into account some of your consideration, some of your recommendations and suggestions, so that the Office of the President, whatever difficulties, challenges, limitations that you may have outlined today, you will want to probably provide us with recommendations for overcoming them, so that in the future, with the Office of the President will be strengthened as a very important institution under the Constitution of the Republic of TNT. Those are the points I would like to submit, through the chair for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Member Mark. In terms of inviting the accounting officer, in terms of making recommendations that we might want to consider to assist him. At this stage, I would like to bring the inquiry to a close. I want to thank Mr. Serret, Ms. Lal, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Budan, Ms. Madeo, Mr. Lee, and Ms. Trotman for attending and being so cooperative in assisting us in this exercise. I want to thank the members of the media and the members of the public who have followed this inquiry. I now bring the public meeting to an end, and this meeting is hereby suspended. I thank you, and please reach home safely.